Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friend Leigh Show. I am your host and friend, Leigh. Okay, so that might have been a little bit delayed. Sorry about that, but I think we're all good now. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I am so excited for this month. Okay, so as you guys know, actually, welcome. If this is your first time coming to the Friend Leigh Show, we're really excited to have you here. And let me tell you kind of how we run the show. So every month we pick a new theme, and then every week during the month we focus on part of the happy framework. So one of the pillars within that framework, and we work with the theme and that pillar together, and we dive into it. We talk about tips and things like that, and then we talk about life experiences. So those are going to be my experiences, your experiences, and we just have a conversation. I like to pretend that you have been invited to my house and we're just hanging around in my living room. I might have brought another friend, you might have brought a friend, and we're all kind of just having our conversation. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. And this theme, last month, we were talking about like what we're going to do for this month. And I had talked about like maybe doing gratitude. It's Thanksgiving in the States. And I thought that that would be kind of like a fun thing to do. And then I was in Arizona this week and I was hanging out with my cousin, and he is a big, like, supporter of the show. He's here quite a bit. And I was like, hey, what do you think about the gratitude? Is there something else, what do you think we should do? And we were talking about my favorite book, which is The Four Agreements. If you guys have never read it, please pick up a copy and read it. It is one of the best books I've ever read. And he was like, what if you just pick one of the agreements and work that as the whole theme? So we had talked about like which one we should do. And we said, how about like, don't take anything personally? And we can talk about that and how it relates to every one of the pillars. So I was like, bingo, bango, there we go. We're all done. That's what I'm going to do. And then today I was like, wait, we can just do the whole book and all four agreements, and then how those relate to each one of the pillars. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the theme is going to be the four agreements. And so this week we're going to talk about how that works with building our health and our our affection for ourselves. So as always, I have started where the beginning of the show, I'm going to kind of talk at you. That's not normally like what we do for the whole show. So that will take a spin. This is more for the people that are listening to it in the audio version. I don't know why I'm having a hard time talking today. In the audio version. So you have a lot, but it's also going to give like kind of a framework for us to be able to discuss going forward. And then we're going to be here for like 45 minutes, an hour, and discuss it. So like always, if you are here live watching either on Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, please let me know that you're here. And also put in the comments if I say something that like you're like, oh shoot, yeah, there's that. Put it inside of the comments, and then we'll pull it up onto the screen, and you'll immediately become part of the show. As I'm going through this part, though, I'm not going to be checking back to the comments. That way, I can kind of keep this free flowing, because otherwise, you guys know we're going to scroll everywhere. So, as we're talking about the four agreements, so what are the four agreements? The four agreements are like I said, it's in this book, and they're very simple rules to live by. But if you can actually live by them, I promise you they will change your life. And I know that sounds like it's like a big kind of thing, a big declaration, but it's true. And years ago, I actually made that as a New Year's resolution, and for probably 4 months, maybe longer, every night and every morning, I read the four agreements. And probably within about a month into it, maybe 6 weeks into it, it was really interesting because things would come up that like I would be, you know, taking something personally, let's say. And it was like, ding, wait, you don't want to do that. Like it was giving me all these nudges of how to like kind of look at my life a little bit differently. So, what are the four agreements? The four are: one, be impeccable with your word. Okay. So, with how you use your word against other people, but also against yourself. Number 2 is don't take anything personally. This is huge. Number 3, that one in itself, I think can absolutely change your whole life. Number 3 is don't make assumptions. Okay. So, having kind of the courage to be able to ask more questions. And then number 4 is to always do your best. Okay. So those are the 4. Super simple. They seem really, really easy. But they're actually putting them into practice is really difficult. But like I said, life changing. So, I made some notes about how we can use those 4 agreements when we're talking about our health and when we're talking about our affection for ourselves. Okay. So, for those of you that are new to the show, the happy framework is a framework that I put together about how we can be looking at our days and finding those joyful moments all throughout the day. A lot of the time we think that happiness is something outside of ourselves, something that, when I get that new job, when I get that promotion, when I get that new car, when I get the new relationship, then I'll be happy. But really, we can be happy right now in this moment. And the happy framework is a framework of areas within our life that we have control over that we can find happiness. So those 5 pillars are our health, our affection for ourselves, our purpose, our partnerships, and our youthfulness. So those are the 5 that we kind of look at. So when we're talking about health and affection for ourselves, I always lump those into the first week of the show because they do go hand in hand and they're very like internal about us. And so when we're looking at being impeccable with our word, this I've talked about a lot and on the show and also in our Facebook group when I do the lives in there, that if we can keep our promise to ourselves, that is going to be huge. It really increases our self-confidence and our self-worth. If we constantly lie to ourselves, which many of us do, me included, if we keep lying to ourselves, then we can't trust ourselves. And that's where we start like having all this like second guessing and am I good enough? And, am I worthy? And you just don't have the confidence in yourself that you're going to show up for yourself because a lot of the time you don't. And so if we can keep our word to ourselves, then we're going to have more confidence. Well, being impeccable with your word is really saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And so when it comes to health and when it comes to, affection for ourselves, really stopping and thinking about the words that we're using to ourselves and using more positive self talk, making sure that we're aligning our actions with our words. And just instead of being an inner critic, really kind of being kind to ourselves. Okay. So all of that is really, really important. Also, when we're thinking about being impeccable and like really using the words like what we mean. So when we talk about like, let's say working out, instead of saying like, I'm going to work out every day, are you? Like you might have the intention that, yeah, I want to, but your schedule and you've never worked every day before. So why do you think you're going to be able to do that every single day now going forward? So instead thinking about, okay, what can I do? What can I commit to? And committing to maybe 3 days a week, that might be a more tangible kind of thing. And if you're going from working out 0 days a week to 3 days a week, there's a lot to celebrate over here. So that is some of the ways that we're going to be able to use the first agreement when we're talking about our health and our affection for ourselves. Then the next one is don't take anything personally. This one is a big one. A lot of us take a lot of things personally, that when somebody says something that we think they're directing it at us, at our character, at who we are, who we're going to be. A lot of the time people aren't even thinking about you. Mike tells me all the time, he's like, when I'm saying something, it doesn't necessarily have to be all about you. And I was like, of course it does. The world revolves around me. And what's funny is I don't think the world revolves around me, but I do think that when I hear things, people are saying it to me about me. And a lot of the times people couldn't care less about what you're doing. So when we say don't take anything personally, we usually mean externally. We usually mean like when somebody is, mean to you, it's probably most times not about you. It's about them, but it's equally as powerful to apply this one to ourselves. So a lot of the times when we make mistakes, when we face challenges, we usually have self criticism that we use a lot more over self compassion. So, and you might think, okay, but if I made the mistake, it was personal, it was me. But what we do is we talk about things like, oh, I'm not good at this, or oh, I suck at this, or oh, I'm never going to be any good at this. And we say things like that, and we take it personally, and we take it like in this macro level of, I made this one mistake, so I must not be good at this at all. Instead, we can be looking at it like, okay, I'm learning. This was just a step in my progress to get to where I want to be. You can look at it like when you make a mistake, you can be like, oh, okay, well, I didn't. I didn't think about all of the rest of this piece of it. I need to go and learn more of another skill in order for me to be able to do this. So, not taking it personally like it's something against your own character, just looking at it like, okay, I did not succeed in that one moment. What can I do to get there? Right. So that's how we can be using that. I'm going through this kind of quickly because my favorite part of the show is when we start having conversations around it. But I do want you guys to have context, so we have this conversation. So the next one is don't make assumptions. Okay. So don't make assumptions about your capabilities. A lot of the time we'll kind of look at things like, oh, I can't do that, or oh, that's too difficult for me, or who am I to do that? Nobody will listen to me. You make all of these assumptions around your capabilities on how you're going to show up, and it limits you. It limits it not only limits you, but it limits what people can get from you because you're not going to fully show up because you don't believe that it's possible. Instead, we should be looking at this like, okay, well, how can I try and explore this new thing, especially when it's coming to healthier habits. You might be like, oh, I always fail at diets. I've tried diets before and I just can't do them. And so you make these assumptions that the way that you were before is the way that you will be in the future. And that's just not true. I mean, it might be true if you don't make the effort to change things, but you have the ability to make change. It won't be easy, but it's possible. And if we make the assumptions that what we've done before is what we'll do in the future, then we will never change. So that's a really, really big one. Thinking that things are too hard. Also thinking that like when we think about the changes that we want to make, looking at somebody that's already in their like 10th season and then looking at it like, I can't do that. You know what? You probably won't be able to. That's right. But you can't make the assumption that that person on their day one was where they are now 10 seasons later, right? But we make that assumption. We're like, "Oh, they're just good at that." No, they just practice that a lot. So those are just some of the things that we don't want to be holding us back because we're not making or because we're making assumptions. Okay. Okay. And then the last one, always do your best. Okay. So this is really big in our health and especially in our happiness. So when we're talking about doing our best, this has nothing to do with perfection. This has nothing to do with going full out and always being on top of your game. It has to do with you doing your best for where you are. Okay? So it also means that you've got to start what's the word for it? You've got to start I'm kind of losing. Okay, so I'll just give you an example because this is what I do. I think that I have to go full out and be on all the time. But what I really need to understand, and that's why I like the fourth agreement in the book, it explains it perfectly. It's like when you're sick, your best, your 100% when you're sick might actually look like only 40% when you've had your sleep, you're feeling healthy, you got all the energy, everything is just coming up roses. Your 100% there is going to be here, right? That's like your absolute best. But if you're sick, you can barely get out of bed and really just showering is your goal that you've accomplished that day, it's going to feel like you're at 40%. But that day, you're giving it 100% of where you are. What it also explains in the book, which again, please read the book. It's really, really good. What it also explains is that going 110%, yes, I know that doesn't actually exist, but going 110% into something is also not your best. So pushing yourself further than where you should be right now is also not your best. So doing your best is just doing what feels the best for you at that time. So when you're really sick, if you normally, you work out first thing in the morning and, you have this full schedule and all this kind of stuff, if you know that your body needs rest, but you say, oh, no, my 100% means that I'm going to work out for an hour and a half at the gym first thing in the morning, that's actually not your best that day. That's not your best. Your best is laying down and recovering, listening to your body and giving it what it needs. So that's why the doing, always do your best, not somebody else's best for that day is really important. That's where recovery happens when you're working out. So for those of you that like actually work out muscles and do weight bearing exercises and all that kind of stuff, I'm not your girl. I don't do that all the time. So I don't know a lot about it. But what I do know is that you cannot work out like a full body workout every single day and go hard because you're never giving your body the chance to recover and actually build that muscle. You need to take a day off. Excuse me. I don't know, my voice, it's not great today. You need to be able to rest and recover in order to build the muscle. And so you would think doing your best means going full out, doing a full body workout every single day, 7 days a week. But that's not actually your best. Your best strategy in that is doing, certain body parts one day, then other body parts another day, and then maybe taking Wednesday off and then starting back on Thursday. Like that's your best. So really evaluating and checking in with your body to see what your body needs. Okay. So making sure that we look at all 4 of those agreements, and what it will do is it'll create a cycle of health, happiness, and self-compassion. Because when we treat ourselves with kindness, you guys, when we take those small steps forward, instead of taking, 100 steps forward the first week and then burning out, when we just take those small steps forward and we're filled with the self-compassion and kindness as we're moving through, and we're able to focus on our progress, not our perfection, then we're going to improve our physical health. We're going to create more joyful moments. And then that's going to trickle into all of those areas that we talked about earlier. So next week, we'll be talking about how we can be tapping into our purpose. The following week after that, we're going to be talking about our partnerships and how these apply, and then our youthfulness. So I think it's going to be a really, really good month. So I want to look here and see if anybody is here live. Wow, we were 18 minutes into that, you guys. I think it's going to be a really, really great month because it's such a great way of looking at life. So yay, Sarah's here. Thank you. It sounds like I need to read this book. Yes, you do. And okay, tiny, tiny, tiny book. Like even inside, well, you can see I highlight, I star, everything. It's very short. So you can absolutely read this in a weekend. And then they have, I should have brought it with me, but I always keep it in my bathroom. So if you get the hardcover or the soft cover, but if you get like a real book, the inside flap, it actually has a summary of all 4 agreements. And so I try to read those every day. So yes, absolutely, absolutely read it. It's going to be so good, Sarah. So, okay, while you guys were listening to that, because there's a few of you guys, so hi, everybody. While you guys were listening to that, I want to know, like, what out of those 4 agreements, so be impeccable with your word. I always get them in the wrong order. Be impeccable with your word. Always do your best. Don't make assumptions. And then the big one, don't take anything personally. Which ones I want to know are your, like, you think, you know what, I'm really good at that one. I always do my best, or I never make assumptions. Which one do you feel like you're, out of the 4, that you're the better in? And then which one do you think you have the most room for improvement? I'd be really, really curious about that. So let me know that. And then let me know anything else that you're thinking of or that came up while you were talking about it. For me, I actually should look back because I'm sure I've probably written in somewhere, if it's not in this book. I've had this book for a very long time. But I've probably written in one of my journals about where I was really having like where I thought that I struggled the most and then where I thought I could improve. But for me, the biggest change, all of them I try to work on, that that I did make when I was reading it every day was the don't take anything personally. I still have a hard time with it sometimes. Um, but I have gotten a lot better. One that I think I need to work on now, I mean, all of them really, especially the assumptions one. I make a lot of assumptions. So I'm trying to develop and start a new business. You guys know, and it has to do with the happy framework and all of that kind of thing. I do make assumptions on that. I do make assumptions on, you know, everybody knows about how to be happy and everybody knows like I'm not doing anything that's like rocket science or that's like totally different. So I make assumptions that nobody would care. But then once I start talking about it with people, then they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. Um, so I need to stop making so many assumptions and really just living my purpose. So we'll be talking a lot about that next week. But the other one that I really need to focus on that is one of the biggest ones for finding balance in your life is the always do your best. Because when I first read this book, and this was years ago, years and years ago, I was like, that's the one that I'm best at. I always do my best. Now, I did this before I read the book for the first time. And I was like, I always do my best. I always go full out and and then I realized that's like we just talked about, that's not your best. Your best is honoring your body, honoring your energy, honoring your mind, honoring all of that and doing what's best for you in that moment. And that I was not good at. I was good at trying to give 150% everywhere I went. And so I was burning out a lot. I still fall into that. And so that's one that I'm going to be probably working on more now that we're talking about it again. I need to start kind of tapping into that and remembering, okay, rest is important, slowing down is important. What does my body need? And I've been doing a lot of that. Like right now, my body needs a breath for some reason. I get too excited about all this. Okay. So Sarah is here. Okay. So both my Sarahs are here. This is exciting. So Sarah says, I'm still working on not taking anything personally, but I feel like I am improving on this one a lot lately. Not worrying so much about what others think. That's awesome, Sarah. That is really cool. So do you have any tips on like why you think that you're getting better at that? Is it just all your travel that you just have worldly knowledge now? I just love her. She has like the absolute coolest career. Like she's a professional vacationer. That's what I tell people, Sarah. um, but anyway, she does like house sits and pet sits and all kinds of things everywhere. My sister is here. Hi, Jennifer. Hey, hey, hey. So you read the book, right? Did you read it? The four agreements. We're talking about the four agreements. So I'm curious from you, Jay. What are out of the four, which one do you find that you're kind of best at that you don't really have to work on? And then which one do you feel like you need to work on? Sarah says, I need to work on not burning myself out. This book, I'm telling you, these four agreements help with burnout like crazy, especially the always do your best. That one I feel like is just, it's a game changer once you start doing it. Like once you start realizing that your energy matters, that go is not always the answer. That will absolutely help you with burnout. And the other thing is, so we say things like that, right? Like, I don't want to burn out. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling too overwhelmed. But then we don't sit and say, okay, what do I have to do in this moment to not burn out? Like we wait until we get to burnout and then it's like, that's it, I'm done. Right. So with this being impeccable with our word, we can really start thinking about how we're framing things. And so for me, what I've noticed is if I'm saying, oh, I'm tired, but you're not actually tired, you're just kind of feeling overwhelmed, but you use the word I'm tired, you're going to start feeling more tired. If you keep saying that, okay, I'm burning out, we say it, but then we don't do the tasks that need to happen to stop burning out. So that's why being impeccable with your word, really figuring out like when you're saying something, what do you actually mean? And then what can we do to help it? And then just doing our best in that moment and knowing that, you know what, this might be a season that we need to like step back from something. That is really hard, really, really hard for me to do. Some of you guys know I'm in the transition of one of those things right now. I haven't told everybody, so I will be working on that in the next couple weeks. But those kinds of things are really difficult, but really important because we're the only ones that know what we need, you know? Okay, so then our other Sarah says, probably the travel lifestyle helps, but also have been speaking up more in group settings and being more vulnerable. That's amazing. That sounds really, really good. Mel is here. Hello, Mel. So happy to see you here. That's so awesome. Is Britt watching too? I don't see him, but let me know if he's here too. Jennifer says, don't stress out, just space them apart. Okay, so just space. Sorry. So this is what happens. If you're new to the show, I will get to comment sometimes too late. And then I'm like, what did I say? What was I talking about? So what are we talking about? Don't space them or just space them out, Jay. Are you talking about when you have too many things to do? That might be what you're talking about. So yeah, if you have too many things to do, spacing them out and actually scheduling them is a really big deal. So yes, that's a good one. Okay, so yes. Okay, thanks, JJ. So, okay, so these are the ones, it's so funny when we can all go, this is the one that I need. This is the one that I need help with. But what ones are you good at? What ones do you feel like, yeah, I've got a pretty good handle on it? Sarah's saying that she's getting better at that one, which is really cool, about not taking everything personally. So which ones do you feel like, yeah, I pretty much got that in the bag? For me, I will also say I do not have this in the bag, but I'm doing better with it, is about the assumptions. So for me, I was like the assumption queen. I would assume that I knew what everybody was thinking. I would assume that I knew what everybody needed. I just made assumptions everywhere. And you guys know what assuming is, right? It just makes an ass out of you and me. And there is really something to that because a lot of the times we're making assumptions based on our own needs, on our own, where we are. And a lot of times the other people, like, you couldn't be further from the truth. But what happens is we make the assumption that we know somebody better or we know what they're thinking. And then we have all of, okay, Jay, I'm going to get to you in just 1 minute. And then we make the assumption without having the conversation. We talked about this in previous shows about checking our stories with people. So we'll make the assumption that, oh, they're upset with me because I did this and this and this. It might just be that they've just been busy and they didn't respond to your text yesterday because, something came up and then they totally forgot, but you put more weight on something and then you make the assumption that people are upset with you. And then it spirals into all this stuff. So what I'm getting better at is checking stories with my friends and being like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Am I doing that right? Like, did I make the right assumption? Usually I did not. And then also asking more questions in the moment to clarify things. Like, okay, so if I heard you right, this is how I'm gathering it, or this is what I'm hearing. I like saying that this is what I'm hearing, because listening to something and just like hearing it, if we can kind of like not make the assumption that you understand what happened and then putting it back in your own words so you understand it and that's how you're going to take it in, then the other person will be like, oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. What I meant was, and then you give them the chance to re-clarify. So that assumptions thing really is a big game changer. So Jennifer says, is sleeping one of them? Okay. Technically sleeping is not one of them, but how could we, I guess it's kind of being impeccable with your word. If you're saying that you want to sleep and you're actually sleeping, like you're actually doing what you said you were going to do, going to bed early, whatever that looks like, then yeah, you could look at it like that. And then also doing your best, you could also look at that if you know that sleep is important to you. So we can, me, I could spin anything. But no, sleeping is not one of them. The 4 agreements are Always do your best, be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, and don't make assumptions. So, Sarah, our world traveler, says, my best is always doing my best. Laugh out loud. I used to burn out a lot too, but now I know my limits. And I had a gym example last week. I wanted to go, but felt tired. So I took a nap instead. That's awesome. Yes. So that is a really, really big one. And I think for congratulations, Sarah, like that's really awesome for you to be the best in that part of it. That's so good. Um, that is where I think a lot of us, especially us as, I don't know if it's overachieving, but like achievers, just achievers, people that like want to do their best. I think a lot of people interpret it the way that I did, that your best is just putting everything into it. And like, I'll sleep when I die. That used to be a motto that I used to wear, like as a badge of honor. It was like, yeah, I only got 2 hours of sleep because I got this, and this done. It's like, does anybody really care that you got like more done? No, because you're putting yourself at a sacrifice and that is not your best. So very good, Sarah. Mel says, repeat those 4 again, please. Okay. So funny. When I just repeated it, I was like, Leanne, stop repeating these. Nobody cares. But okay, I will do them and I will do them slower. So be impeccable with your word. So actually, you know what, you guys, I'm going to just run really quick. Okay. Cause I'm going to read you like the whole thing. So if you're listening to this in the audio version, there's going to be 10 seconds of like silence. Sorry. Okay, and I'm back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this card. This is like in the flap of the book. So this is what they say because they've got a little summary. So be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. So that's the first one. Be impeccable with your word. Number 2 is don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. That's the second one. Don't take anything personally. The third one, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. So that's when we talk about checking your story with people. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Word for word out of this. So that was the third one. Don't make assumptions. And the last one is always do your best. So your best is going to change from moment to moment. It'll be different when you're healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. Always do your best. So that last part is a big one because you can avoid regret because if you did your best, and I want you to consider this too, that your best is going to change, right? So your best, like right now in this podcast, my best right now is very different from when I'm going to be podcasting in 2 years. And I have 2 years of podcasting under my belt. And my best looks better right now than it did 3 years ago when I started podcasting. So your best is always going to, if you keep improving, is always going to look different. So you can't regret, like I can't look at my first show that I did 3 years ago and be like, man, I really regret how bad I was. But I did my best and that's all that I could do. Right. So right now, I can't regret that I'm not as good as I will be in 2 years because I don't have that experience. I don't have that wisdom and all of that. So you can't regret anything if you did your best. So that's why it's such a good one. Okay. So Mel says, my best used to be saying yes to everything my boss asked me to do. Doing better at not taking things personally. Okay, that's awesome. So let's go back to the first one. So yes, your best you thought was to always say yes to everything that your boss asked you to do. But now do you kind of realize that like That's not the best. Sometimes you need to set boundaries. Sometimes you need to just say what you're feeling. Like you're not going to be able to do everything that somebody expects of you. Um, that's a huge one. And you're doing better at not taking things personally. So, how is that working out for you? Because I want people to be talking about the tangible ways of how you think you got there, or like what's something that somebody said that kind of just like sparked it for you and you were like, oh shoot, yeah, you know what, that totally makes sense. So what has helped you get to the point that you're actually doing better at not taking things personally? Sarah says the best agreement reminds me of Stephen Covey's seventh habit, sharpen the saw. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about sharpening the saw, and then you tell me if I got this right, because I vaguely remember it, but I kind of remember the story. What I'm picturing is a man that he had to shoot. Okay, that he maybe you want to start writing, Sarah, so then as soon as I'm done, you're like, no, this is what it meant. So the picture that I have in my mind is the man that had a saw and he kept sharpening it under the tree. He had to cut down the tree. But then there was like other people that were like, "Oh, you're taking forever. Like I can be doing this." And so they were using their saw just the way that it was. So they were trying to cut it down, and yes, they could cut down the first tree and the second tree, but then it started not working, and this guy had cut no trees down, but because he was sharpening his saw, getting himself to be able to do his best, then when everybody else was like, okay, that's done, and I could only do certain amounts, he was able to just go and like zoom, zoom and be done. He didn't have to like take forever to do one tree. He had a sharp blade, able to do it in less time, do more, get better at it because he was sharpening his saw, which is kind of like us sharpening our skills, getting our sleep, taking care of our body, doing all those things to set ourselves up for success. Correct? Sarah says that sounds right. Okay, yes, it's probably a much more eloquent um, way of saying it, but yes, that was such a good one. Um, Mel says the word no. It feels so good, like freedom. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, that is awesome. And then she also says, I've learned to stop and say, what do you mean? Before I'm all in my feels. So good. Yes. So checking your story, having somebody kind of reiterate what they just asked you or what they just said, because we tend to take a lot of things personally. It's really hard to hear what somebody has to say and take it just for, criticism, not self-criticism, but just criticism on the situation. So really asking more questions. And I like how they talk about it's having the courage. So you're actually a stronger person, which is so bonkers to me that like a lot of us don't ask questions because we don't want to feel stupid, that we're like, we think we're less than when we're asking questions. But in fact, being vulnerable, asking the questions is actually a strong character trait. And so, if we can ask more questions, then we're actually a stronger person. If we're more vulnerable, we're a stronger person. So, all these things that we've been like told or taught is like less than, let's question all of that too, because usually it's much it's much better to be weird because you're asking questions and you're doing all that because you're just going to become a more well-rounded person. So yes, so that is awesome, awesome. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything else. I think I've got all of you guys. You guys have been doing awesome because this is my favorite part is when we can actually have a conversation about all of this. Okay, so another thing that we were talking about is the don't make assumptions. Okay, so I always focus on the like being courageous and asking more questions. But there's another part in there that says, and to express what you really want. So communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings. So us being clear in our communication is huge. And that's a big thing about instead of making assumptions based on, oh, he knows what I need, oh, my boss knows that this is what I do. Oh, that person knows that's their job. They know when we make those assumptions, instead of being extremely clear about what we want or what we need in the situation, that ends up causing a lot of misunderstanding because you're making the assumption that somebody knows a certain amount of information. And if they don't, and then they come back and do something, even if it was like they tried their best, but they didn't know what you thought they knew, then now you're going to be disappointed. Your expectation was too high. So if we can have, instead of making assumptions that like, oh yeah, my husband knows the way that I feel about that. So he won't even ask me about that, or he'll pick the right fill in the blank or whatever it is. Instead, we can just be clear about what our expectations are, clear about what we need, clear about how we're feeling. And if we can do all of that, then it doesn't leave a whole lot of things up to chance and argument and drama and all of the rest of it. So that's a big one in assumptions that I don't think we talked about when we were talking about it in the beginning, because I kind of guided it more in the asking of questions to clarify what other people are saying. But knowing that us, we don't ask a lot of questions, you can make the assumption that they don't ask enough questions. So don't assume that they know what you want them to know, if that makes sense. Okay, so where are you guys at with? So you guys were talking about, this is interesting. So a lot of you guys were talking about taking things personally and then doing your best. What about being impeccable with your word? Where do you guys sit with that? Do you feel, I'm going to read it one more time. So speak with integrity, say only what you mean, and avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. I mean, hey, I would like to say that we all are like very good with being impeccable with our word, but I think that's a big one. I think that's a big one that if we're honest with ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves, that we tend to struggle with that one, especially when it comes to ourselves. So I'm curious, do you feel like you are really good, that you don't use the word against yourself? Um, do you gossip about other people? And do you find that you're better at some of these um, or worse in certain company? Like, are there certain people that when you get around them, you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know why, but I gossip about people when I'm hanging out with Krista. I don't know what it is, but we get together, we go for dinner, and then we're always talking about so and so, or we're always talking about whatever it is. Do you find that there's certain people that will spark some of these agreements, good or bad? Um, because I think that's a good way of looking at our life too. If we can look at them under this lens and then say, yeah, you know what? When I'm with Krista, and I'm only using that because I don't really have a lot of friends named Krista. So if I do, okay, Chris, I do have a couple Kristas. I'm not talking about you. Okay. I just made up that name. So, but if you do have some friends that like when you're together, you tend to gossip more, but you don't even realize it because that's just what you've done for years. Now would be a really good time to be like, I don't I don't really like that about us. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop hanging out with them. It just means maybe you change the conversation. Maybe when you guys go out for dinner, you go for drinks, and it just starts that you just randomly start talking about what the waitress is wearing. And you'd be like, hey, you know what? I've actually been thinking about this. And I don't know that I feel great that we do that. Did you even notice that we do that? And that might just be enough to change the conversation. Because I don't think anybody, that might not be true, but I would like to think that nobody really wants to be talking poorly about other people, but just sometimes you kind of fall into out of habit, out of circumstance, out of just being in the proximity of like, high school friends, that's what you guys did in high school. And so now you're still doing the same things that you did back then. But if we can like just honor that and say, hey, you know what? I've grown. I'm not really a big fan of that anymore. Then we can change it. And it's okay to talk about it. And then if that friend is like, yeah, what? So you're better than me now. And then they just keep turning it because they want to be that way. then you get to decide if you still want to be hanging out with that person, right? And if you do, no judgment, whatever. But you get to make that decision after you've had the conversation. But I would say more times than not, people will be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said something. Yeah, I'm only that way with you. Why do we do that?" Right? Or, "Yeah, that's something that I want to get better at." Or, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize. Yeah, you know what? You're right. We do that. Why?" So I think bringing it up, I think is one of those things. So being impeccable with your word, I think is something that we could be doing when we're having conversations with people and just being honest about like, hey, this doesn't feel great. And even if it was something that you did for 20 years with that person, you just be like, it just doesn't feel great anymore. Like, can we just switch that up? You know? So um let us look at this. Mel says, I used to be a gossiper. Now, if I'm in a group or with someone who gossips, I change it. That's awesome. Mel says, gossiping is so toxic. Yes, it absolutely is. And I love that you admitted that you used to be a gossiper. I know that I still am a gossiper sometimes with certain people. And it's usually with people that I've been friends with for a very long time because back in the day, that's what we did, right? We talked about people. And I think that when we're not growing and we don't have a lot of exciting things to talk about, it's easy to talk about other people. Just is. Um, so yeah, that is awesome that you change it up. Sarah says, I either change the subject or I dissociate. I do need to call people out for it more, but it takes a lot of courage. Yes. Okay. So it takes a lot of courage, but instead of looking at it like calling them out, you don't have to be like, stop doing that. You're a bad person. You can just be like, I've been thinking about this. Like, why do we do that? Like, because if they're gossiping and you're in that conversation, guess what? You're gossiping too. So instead of being like, oh, you make me this way, or I only do this with you, just be like, hey, you know what? I'm really trying to like stop gossiping. Can you help me with that? Like, do you find that you're doing it too? Like, I don't know why we do that. Like, you can have like softer conversations that way. We don't always have to be like, hey, so I don't gossip anymore. I'm realizing that you're doing it a lot. Like you need to change. You can kind of initiate them to help you, or just bring it up like just a curious thing. Curiosity is really, really good in making people like get curious with you and kind of diving into it and like, why are we doing these things and how can we change it? How can we try to change it? So that might be helpful. Oh, yeah, that's a great tip. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so that it's just a nice way of looking at it, right? Um, and then, like I said, if they decide that they don't want to change or they like that way, then guess what? They can go to their next friend and gossip about how you don't gossip anymore. But we need to protect ourselves. We really do. And time is really the only asset that we will never get back. Like you're never going to get any of these years that have already passed back. So going forward, like really diving into the relationships, the conversations that nourish you, it just makes your life better. And so if you're not around the right people, then maybe it's time to step aside. They're just not part of that season. And they may come back. They may even come back if they were like, "Oh God, like you're so high and mighty, Sarah. Like we used to be fine gossiping and now we can't." And then they might get upset, whatever. And then they leave and you don't talk to them. And then they may come back in a week or a month or a year and be like, you know what? What you said really resonated. I really took offense to it, but you're right. I'm so sorry. Let's start again. Let's go out for dinner and let's see how that works out. We're all at different paths. And because all of us knew that like we've gotten better in some of these four agreements, the reason why we know that we're better is because we know that we weren't good before. And so there was that journey to get from there to here. And so there's some people that are just still here, but they've made the journey in other areas, maybe in other agreements. And so we can't look at it like because I'm here and I've evolved and I'm doing better, then I got to shut off everybody that hasn't gotten to where I am because they are further along in other things than you are. And you don't want them to cut you off because you haven't made your way through that journey yet. Right. So, anyway, that is about it. I think I'm going to wrap up because The reason why we've changed the show to 7:30 is because Mike has a show at 8:30, and I want to make sure that I have time to wrap up with you guys, and then for him to get in here and to set up. So I think we're going to start doing the show more as a 45, 50-minute kind of thing. But we will always be continuing the conversation over on our Facebook page. We also have, I've been talking about it for months, but there is some new things coming that we're going to be able to have more deeper conversations personally, not on public forums. So we will be talking about that in the future. But for now, head on over to Facebook, The Friend Leigh Show, and we can continue the conversation. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for everybody being here. Thank you so much for being such a big part of the conversation. It really is my absolute favorite part of the show. And make sure to tune in next week, bring a friend. And we're going to be talking about these 4 agreements and how we can use them when we're talking about living into our purpose. So it's going to be a really good show, I think. Think about it. And I will see you next week. Love you. Love you. Have a good one. Bye.